Hi, everyone. Today's guest is Todd Hirsch. He's an internationally renowned speaker and author focusing on adaptability in the ever-changing global economic environment. An economist by training, he now focuses on his research and writing on the subject of adaptability. And currently, he is the director of Energy Transition Center, an incubator of tech startups focused on navigating our path towards a net zero carbon. Prior to this, he served as VP and Chief Economist for ATB Financial. Todd has received the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum 2022 and the Diamond 2012 Jubilee Medals, the University of Alberta's Alumni Honor Award, and he has an honorary degree from Mount Royal University. I am so happy to have him here, and we're going to have a great conversation. So please welcome Todd Hirsch.
Hello, Kate. Hello, everybody on the podcast. So great to be here.
Welcome to Humor in the C-Suite, Todd. I'm so happy. And I got to, address the elephant in the room. It does look like you're in a closet right now.
I am not metaphorically, but I am physically in a closet. I found out during COVID that this is the absolute best sound space I can create in my home. And it just tip to the wise. If you need a good soundproof space, the closet is the best.
I love it. I love it. And for you all listening to this, it's true. I swear it's true. I'm not being weird. So today we're going to discuss how we use humor in the corporate environment and to create a great atmosphere for people. So I always like to start off the podcast by asking my guests, what is your favorite joke? Do you have one?
I have a lot of favorite jokes, but when I was going through them, I thought, oh, those are just groaners, like terrible dad jokes. But this is the best joke that I could come up with for this podcast. So here we go. I just read that in New York City, somebody gets stabbed every 52 seconds. The poor guy.
That's pretty good, I gotta say.
I tried really hard to find one. And they've got to be, I like short jokes, right? There's nothing longer than these shaggy dog jokes that go on for 5 minutes and you never get to
forever and ever. And then the punchline's the worst anyway. Yeah, it's okay. I heard this on a WestJet plane ride the other day. Why did the M&M go to university? He wanted to become a smarty. So dumb.
That's so a dad joke.
That is such a dad joke. Well, I love it. So you've been a chief economist, head of a bank. You're now working with a company. I can't believe how many awards you've won. Why are you such a big deal? The Queen loved you. I had no idea.
I did get both the Diamond and the Platinum Jubilee Medals, which I was a big honor. But yeah.
Oh my God. How do you decide what to wear? That's what I want to know. How do you decide? Oh my gosh. Being in those environments, which are very corporate, obviously, and there's so much pressure in terms of people and money. I mean, that could be a huge stress anyway.
Yeah.
How did you use humor to sort of lead your teams?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. And I was thinking a lot about how I've used humor in the almost 30 years now that I've been a chief economist. By the way, I've retired from my corporate job, so I'm just on my own now. But for about 16 years, I was, this vice president and chief economist of a bank based here in Alberta, ATB Financial. And a big part of my role, probably 60 or 70%, was traveling around Alberta and Canada giving economic presentations. But I really found that if I can incorporate some humor into an economics presentation, boy, does that change the formula for the audience. Because a lot of people on the topic of economics, they're a bit intimidated by it. They, for whatever reason, they feel that I don't understand economics, I don't understand financial things. But if I can use some humor, it really brings down the fear level, and it helps sort of just disarm people, and it helps them be able to understand what I'm talking about. So I was always a big advocate of using humor, especially humorous images. And I become early on in sort of my economics presentation career. I dropped the charts and graphs. I just decided those don't have any. They ain't got no space in a presentation. They're okay if you want to do some handouts for people, but if you are showing slides in a big conference room to people, charts and graphs are the kiss of death. It is like filling the room full of ether. You're going to kill them. Instead, use some image, and particularly a funny or humorous image, and tell some. Not that I'm up there as a comic, but I can
No.
use some humor to sort of relate what's going on. So that's primarily, I think, how I've used humor is as an economist in my presentations.
And it's so true. There is so much fear when it comes to people and money. I had
Yeah.
one friend who's a great comic, and she had a joke where her mom was always bugging her, "What is your financial plan? What is your financial plan?" And she'd always say, "You are." Yeah. Welcome to
Well,
the 2000s.
and I would say I would have to alter the humor in the presentation depending on what's going on. For example, some of the podcast listeners will remember right around October 2008. This was the very beginning of the global financial market meltdown, the debt crisis. And I remember I was driving from Edmonton out to a little city called Sherwood Park, Alberta, and to give a presentation that evening to some of our wealth management clients. So as I'm driving out there, Barack Obama is the president. He's giving this national address. He's calling in all the heads of the banks. And it really felt on that day that capitalism had collapsed and it's all over for everybody. I got to the event. One woman was crying. She was so nervous and so fearful about what was going on. On that day, I had to sort of bring in the humor or rein in the humor because on that specific day, nothing felt funny to people. I still had to speak to them in a way that they could relate to and calm their fears, but there was an appropriate time for jokes, and that night probably wasn't it. And there's been a few other situations. Alberta's gone through some terrible recessions. In the deepest, darkest parts of it, it's not that humor is never appropriate in that moment, but you kind of have to read the room and you have to sort of figure out, do these people need some calming down or do they need some levity right now? So I think there's
Absolutely.
a wise way of knowing when to use humor.
And did you find when you were VP, when you were dealing with like people who were working closely with you, like certain teams, did you find, were you using humor with them? Or did you
Oh,
find
yeah.
like you could use humor when, your humor changed when you were dealing with someone who was sort of your peer or someone who was maybe just starting out in the company? Was it different? Did you find you had to hold yourself differently?
Yeah, maybe differently. I mean, some of that is just sort of, going with your gut and knowing what you think would be funny at the moment. If I'm dealing with my boss or if I'm dealing with a summer student or anyone in between. But
Yeah.
I really loved using humor to keep the office environment sort of light and friendly. Obviously there's serious work that still needs to go on, but on a regular day-to-day basis, there's always got to be space for a joke or a little prank or being playful or something
Yeah.
like that. I really did try to use that a lot.
That's so great because I find, when we use humor, it really bonds people. And if we're bonded in the
Absolutely.
good times, when the hard times and recessions do come, then we work as a team as well because we've already bonded in the good times.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one of my favorite pranks, or I guess jokes that I played on. He wasn't a summer intern, but he was sort of young and out of school and new to my economics team. And at the time, we had launched a daily economic little report, and we called it the Owl. And we called it the Owl because the great horned owl is Alberta's provincial bird. they're sort of symbols of wisdom. They can see in all directions. They can see in the dark. So we called it the owl rather than something boring like the daily economic comment, which is what it was called before. So we rebranded it. We called it the owl, and we were going to sort of launch this thing, and we had a bit of a media thing. And I told our new hire, Will, his name was,
Yeah.
and I did it with a straight face, and the rest of the team, they were in on the joke too. And I said, you guys, you can't break down and laugh. This has to be serious. So I told Will to help promote the owl. We're going to get him an owl costume, and he's going to be the mascot that will travel around the province with me dressed as an owl. And that's going to help promote our little daily newsletter called the Owl. And I did it straight face, and I said, but don't worry, we're not gonna make you look silly. We're gonna get a really good owl costume. Like, we're gonna put some money into this. And the look on his face, because he's new, right? He's new to the team. He doesn't want to say, I'm not doing that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So he's trying to be positive, and he's like, well, yeah, I never really thought that, I'd be doing this, but he goes, I'll mull it over. To this day, that's still the joke we have with him. I'll mull it over. When I let him in on the joke, I said, no, Will, we're kidding. We're not gonna dress you up as an owl.
How long did you keep it going? Like, did he mull it over for a night?
No, we just kept it going for like a few minutes in that meeting.
Oh my gosh.
But the rest of the team, they did a great job in being stone-faced and nodding.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, this is a great idea. Because if any of them had cracked, it sort of blows the prank.
Yeah. I wonder if he was thinking, oh my gosh, I spent like hundreds of thousands going to school, and now I'm going to be in a costume. I'm the mascot.
Well, and I kind of miss those office days. I know the world's changed and it's work from home and remote, and I understand that too. But during COVID, my partner and I, we've sort of binged watched. Do you remember the old Office, the TV series, The Office?
Of course. Yeah.
And that was kind of set in, I think, late 90s or early 2000s, but it was still this office environment. And it really made me feel a little bit nostalgic for the office environment, for all the love and hate that goes on there. But, the opportunity for pranks, that Jim was always playing on I forget the guy's name, but they were playing pranks all the time. And I remember, I worked for years in that office environment, and you used humor and pranks, and it really does help sort of bond the team. But now we live in a world, it's hard to play a prank on someone in a virtual Zoom meeting. I mean,
absolutely.
You can still use humor. But
just trying to keep a straight face so people take you seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, especially for someone young coming in. Do you have any advice you'd give them? Like, I think we're all trying to be more of ourselves. And I think if we, do you have any advice?
Advice? I mean, it's tough because as somebody new coming in, you kind of want to read the room. Is your boss or the rest of your team, are they the kind that use humor? And if they are, go with that. If they're not, I would proceed with caution. Because some people, I mean, it's to their detriment, but some people, they're just not really very funny, or they're not much fun. I had one good friend of mine, the COVID time, she was sort of new in her company, and they were all doing Zoom calls, her team and everything like that. And they were talking about this situation, I don't know, it was in the media. Somebody was like in a house coat or something like that. And anyway, so the next day for the Zoom call, she thought she's going to be funny and she's going to put her house coat on, and this is going to get a laugh. It didn't get a laugh. It got no response. And in fact, her boss contacted her later and said, that's inappropriate attire. We expect you to be professional and dress professionally, even if it's a Zoom call. And my friend had to say, well, I was trying to do it as a joke, because we had made this sort of thing. It did not land. So, sometimes she was trying hard.
Yeah, sometimes jokes don't land, but she was trying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did they forgive her?
Someone new? they forgave her. I don't know. Her boss sounded not like a very nice person. But once my friend, explained I was doing this as a little bit of levity, as a little bit of a joke,
Yeah.
because we had talked about, that other person who was wearing a house coat.
Yeah.
But I don't think her boss, really understood. But it
Stood.
was,
Yeah.
it just ended with try to be more professional on the Zoom call. And it's like, well, so for someone new coming in, a young person, or even just a new person to the team,
Yeah.
really try to read the room. Try to use humor. Maybe you can make some changes to an otherwise humorless group. Maybe you'll be a little bit of a ray of sunshine. but
Absolutely.
but you got to sort of proceed with caution, I would say.
Even I find like playing games, and maybe doing it for charity that you're all working for is a great way to bring levity and sort of team
Yeah.
building. Did you ever use stuff like that in your corporate career?
Oh, I remember this is years, like probably 20 or 30 years ago. Boy, I
You
don't
look
even
too
like to
young.
think about that. But at a Christmas party, and it was it was an office of about 15 people. It was actually really a lot like the TV show The Office, that kind of setting with about that many people. But for a Christmas party, me and a couple others had designed this. It was sort of like a snakes and ladder board game, and we had dice and little tokens that we had made out of pictures of ourselves that we blew up on the photocopier, and dice, and you had to draw cards and go around the whole thing. And we had these just kind of hilarious, sort of like the game of life, like you land on these
Yeah,
spaces and you have to do things, or you win money, or
that's
fake
so
money or
fun.
whatever. It was actually, it really worked well, and it yeah, it sort of brought everyone together. And in an office set, at times it was hard to sort of pull everyone into the levity of it. But I do remember that board game that we designed and created worked really well.
It's amazing because, as you say, it's that long ago and you're still remembering it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
obviously it had effect, and a positive effect, and
yeah.
hopefully everyone from that team is still thinking about it.
I bet
Going,
they do. I mean, yeah, I should. I still know a few people. I bet if I asked them, they would remember that Christmas party and that board game that we made.
and did you find when you were VP, you had um, that fine balance between, being yourself and being that professional and trying to sort of walk that line, or were you always yourself?
I think I was always myself. I mean, again, you have to
I
sort
feel
of
like
know
you
when.
would be.
I think I was. And, in a lot of ways, I'm not a traditional vice president of a bank. It was a great job. It was wonderful, but so many times I kind of shook my head and I thought, how did I end up as a vice president of a bank? I don't even like banks. I'm an economist. I'm not a finance guy. I'm not a banker, but here I am, and I am a bit well, I am fun, and I'm a bit crazy and unconventional in a lot of things. But here I am, a vice president of a bank, and a bank at the time in Alberta, and they won't mind me saying this, but it was a very sort of traditional conservative bank. In the early 2000s and the 2010s, the president that came in, his name was Dave Mowat. He really changed the culture of ATB and made it a bit of we wanted to be a surprising bank, not a traditional button down conservative zero fun bank, but rather one that sort of embraced the day. A lot of color, a lot of sort of humor in our advertising campaigns. And I guess I did fit that role. I was the public face of ATB for a lot of years, doing media and doing these crazy presentations all over the place. So I guess I fit that role for ATB at the time, because they were looking for a fresher, more approachable, um, I guess, persona for a traditional bank.
I love that. Just the fact that you said colorful and fun, less traditional. It really does, especially in those sort of environments, brings people together and wants people to be a part of it,
Yeah.
especially if they're using funny advertising.
Yeah, they had
Yeah.
a lot of really good comedy in their advertising, and Dave Mowat, who was the president, did a lot of radio ads himself, like where he's speaking, And I mean, it's hard to explain without knowing him, but even just his voice is so approachable. The minute he starts talking, even if he's not necessarily telling a joke, you just kind of felt at home with listening to him talk. He was so approachable, and that was, and I guess I was part of that sort of campaign to make economics more approachable and more understandable for people. Get rid of the charts and graphs, and let's have a funny picture of a duck, and I'm going to use that to talk about whatever, however I did it.
It's okay, Todd. I didn't even realize how broke I was until last year. Somebody stole my identity and it ruined her life. Are you listening to me? But I love the fact that you were a part of that. And when you say approachable, I think that's what humor does. It brings people together, and it
Yeah.
is a fine line between using that and your professionalism. But I think it also shows confidence.
Yeah, I think it does. And maybe it was a confidence that at that stage in my career, I guess I had earned. I did feel confident in that. And I don't know if, when I was in my early 20s, starting out as an economist, working in those other roles, if maybe I would have had that same confidence level. I think I've always been a person naturally who enjoys a good joke, who enjoys making people laugh, even though I'm not a comedian, but I think it wasn't until later in my career, especially my 15 years at ATB Financial, when I felt the confidence. For one thing, I knew what I was doing in my job. I knew what I was talking about. I could stand in front of an audience. I know exactly what I'm going to say, and I can actually make them feel a bit welcomed, bring their guard levels down, make them smile, make them laugh while they're learning about what's going on in the economy.
Which necessarily might be the opposite of everything you just said.
Especially these days. I mean, it's getting worse. Now I'm kind of a professional public speaker on the economy, sort
Yeah.
of full time. And I don't know if there's ever been a time where I felt as anxious about what's going on. I mean, there's been times in the past, maybe because of a specific situation or event, like 9/11 comes to mind, the financial crisis of '08, the beginning of COVID. But here we are in 2024, and there's no specific event you can point to, like, 9/11. But people are feeling very anxious about what's going on. Geopolitics, it's none of it is good. So again, I do use humor. I have to sort of gauge when to use humor and when to kind of bring it down. But I think there's even in dark days, there's always some scope for humor. There's got
I
to be.
love that. There has to be. A little levity can go a long,
Yeah,
long way. And humor
yeah,
really does make us kinder to one another.
yeah, yeah,
It just people, their guards come down. They're like, oh, you feel the same way.
yeah,
You get me. It really, I think, just brings people together
yeah.
in a
I
shared
remember
moment.
this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but I was one of the speakers at my father's funeral 10 years ago. And, it was like funerals, I think, depending on the situation, but you have to bring some humor into it. And I told some great stories that probably most people in the audience hadn't heard before, and, really changed the mood. So you can still be mournful, but it can also be a celebration if you can have a good laugh at something.
Oh my gosh! At my grandmother's funeral, the rabbi got up and he was like, "This woman was so warm and loved people," and we were all laughing because she hated everyone. We're like, "Who is he talking about?" Oh my gosh! She lived to 90 just out of pure anger. You know what I mean? Like, we're like, "What is happening?" Yeah, so funny. Oh my gosh. It just made the whole day for us. We're listening. All of us were giggling, the entire family, because
Well,
when you die at 90, you don't really have a lot of friends at your funeral. It's just family, right?
yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
we all knew her so well, but yeah, so funny. So it's always those moments. And do you find that, like when you were dealing with the financial crisis or any of those pivotal moments in your career where people were really looking, to you for the answers, did you find that you were able to you did say before you could bring a bit of levity, but you're always reading the room and seeing what's going on. So being sensitive to that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, and you're a speaker too. I know that you would find this really big audiences are a lot tougher. And Zoom calls, forget it because I cannot look into the eyes of the people in the audience. I can't gauge how they're reacting to this. I can get no read of the expression on their faces. Are they looking anxious? Are they laughing? Are they smiling? It's the energy of the audience that sort of informs me as a speaker, maybe when to use a joke, maybe when to pull back a little bit. So
Absolutely. And I think we can be, we can be self-deprecating a bit. That always works. I know a lot of people who, maybe if you want to bring humor into the workplace, it's change. You can send a meme out. So it's not necessarily you directly telling a joke, but you can find the little, moments in those in your day-to-day life to bring humor. And it doesn't have to be telling a joke. It's more not taking ourselves so seriously and bringing that.
absolutely. Yeah. I use
Yeah.
self-deprecating humor all the time, and I think it comes out of a place of confidence. In
Yeah.
fact, one of my favorite talks I give is everything I learned about the economy, I learned in grade 8 phys ed. And it was sort of
That's so great.
because everyone remembers grade 8 phys ed, and for most
Oh
of us,
yeah.
it was absolute hell. But I talked about how I was always the last one to be picked on
Yeah.
the teams, when they were lining up for basketball, especially, I'm always last or second last to be picked. But I always said, it was okay for me. It wasn't devastating because I knew that in 55 minutes, we're going to be back in math class and I'm going to kick all your asses because I knew who I was as a student. Like I
Yeah.
was terrible at phys ed. So I could be self-deprecating that way. And it's a story, not only is it kind of fun, but a lot of people can relate to it.
Oh yeah. Oh my. Did you have horrible like uniforms you had to wear for
Horrible.
that?
Well, even worse, Kate. I mean, I was a fat, chubby kid, and this is
Stop it. You're so
Oh
skinny
yeah.
though.
Well, that's a
It's
lot
so
of work.
funny.
Well, and a lot of kids, they're just chubby until they sort of grow into
Yeah.
their bodies. But like in
Yeah.
grade 8, I'm 14 years old. I'm really awkward. I'm really uncomfortable in my body.
You
I'm
got the creepy
fat.
dirt mustache.
Oh, and there's weird smells and hair growing, and it's just nothing about my body I'm not happy with anything about my body. Yet in phys ed, it was shirts and skins for the boys. And you think the law of randomness would mean at least half the time I'm going to be shirts? No, never, never.
No.
I was always skins. And it was always just the most demoralizing 55 minutes. Not only
Yeah.
did I have to be half naked in front of all my peers, hating my chubby little smelly body, but I couldn't play basketball. So I just sort of spent the entire 55 minutes running around the court, avoiding the ball and avoiding sort of having to do anything and just
Instead of
counting the minutes.
oh my God, it's like you thought basketball was dodgeball. Just dodging the ball the whole time.
The only thing, and this is true, the only thing in phys ed I could ever really do half decently was the tumbling because I was so roly poly. I could do somersaults. Like that was
You're
about the
like
only
a
thing.
panda.
And trampoline because I had some heft, right? So I could catch some air. But the rest of it, I mean, I don't know what it's like in phys ed now, but they used to make you climb that rope up to
Oh
that
yeah.
ceiling of the gymnasium, which for one thing seems really dangerous to do.
No mats
I don't
on you
know.
back then.
Oh, we
Absolutely
maybe
no
had like a
mats.
1 inch skinny little mat. That is not going to
No.
save your bones. But I could
Yeah.
never really even get off the ground with that rope. It was just, everyone's got to try. Come on, Todd. You're 210 pounds in grade 8. Let's see you climb the rope.
Oh my
I was
gosh.
going.
If it's any consolation, I was just as horrible at phys ed.
The
Oh
funny
my
thing
gosh.
is, Well, the funny thing is when I tell this story, everyone comes up to me afterwards and they go, I was always last to be picked too, which you think statistically, we can't all have been picked last. But it only probably takes a couple of times being picked last when your experience feels like I'm always picked last, right? Because
Yes.
it really is an upsetting. I don't know if coaches do this anymore, but it's not fun. It's a really
No.
great way to get an evenly matched team in a hurry. I get the efficiency of it. And that's one
Yeah.
of the things when I talk about the economy, I talk about the market economy is efficient, but it can be cruel. And we have to put some guardrails in. It's the same way picking teams in phys ed. It's a really efficient way to get two evenly matched basketball teams, but it's cruel and it has no respect or regard for people's emotions or, what they might
Self-esteem. Yeah.
self-esteem. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, I'm still working on mine. Grade 3 was a hard year for me. It doesn't
Grade
matter.
3.
We won't get into I just start crying. I'm like, oh my God. So now I love the fact, other than keynote speaking, you're working with an environmental startup.
Kind of. So I am the director of the Energy Transition Center. The center. It's a partnership of the University of Calgary, and they have what they call Innovate Calgary.
Yep.
That's the arm of the university that helps commercialize some of the really great research that comes out of the University of Calgary. And a little plug for the third year in a row, the University of Calgary, not the country's largest university, but for 3 years in a row, it has produced more startup commercially successful companies than any other university. So
Wow.
Innovate Calgary partners with a for-profit company called Avatar Innovations. They give some seed capital to basically, you wouldn't even call them startups, but teams of individuals. They've got a great idea. They have no proof of concept. They've certainly got no customers. They don't have revenue. They don't have a company yet, right? These would be the people that show up on Dragon's Den, like everyone watched
Yeah.
Dragon's Den, and Arlene
I made my
Dickinson would say,
prototype out of paper.
yeah, it's those people. And the dragons might say, if they're in a good mood, they might say, it's a really great idea, but you don't have a business yet. All you have is an idea. Come back to
Yeah.
us in 3 years when you got some revenue. So Avatar funds these good ideas. They're at like 0 or -1, kind of on that scale of commercializing. They've got a good idea, but they need a bit of seed capital. The center is really kind of what we call a collision space. It is a physical space. It's the floor of one of the buildings in downtown Calgary, and it is meant to be a collaboration space where people hang out. They talk to other people. What are you working on? Here's what we're working on. We give these people a bit of office space, some boardroom space
Amazing.
if they want to meet with a potential client. And we know that as an incubator often is, most of these ideas they're not going to
Well,
work. But enough of them just might work to make this whole process worthwhile.
and do you
And it
find
is
when
all
you're,
around. It's all
yes,
around clean energy or renewable energy. So everything
amazing.
in the effort to remove or to move towards net zero carbon emissions.
I love that, especially for a province that's so oil based.
Well,
That's
that's
pretty
right.
incredible.
And here in Calgary, we know that we've got a lot of stereotypes that we are trying to overcome. Yeah,
Yeah.
we are Canada's oil and gas province, but we also lead in a lot of ways around investments in renewable energy and also moving our traditional oil and gas, which is going to
Yeah.
keep happening, but reducing carbon emissions and even moving oil to net zero carbon emissions.
Wow, that's amazing. So when you're
Yeah,
dealing with, do you get to meet any of these kids who are, well, I call them kids even though they're not,
a
but
lot of them
are
are kids, but
and do you find using humor with them works way more? Because I find
yeah.
like people coming in nowadays are like, we want to, they were asked in a study, what do they want from a boss? And one of the things someone said is, I want them to speak like a real person.
Oh, yeah. Like
Right?
it's funny that that is, on the list of too much to ask. Like, can you at
Yes.
least talk to me like a real person? That's very
Yeah.
telling. I do act as a bit of a mentor. So most of these students, and a lot of them are students or they're recent graduates. A lot of them work for the oil and gas companies already, and their companies second them to work on their little startups for a while. So some of them come from some of the big oil sand producers, but they're little teams of usually about 5 or 6 people. often they are young, but they're not exclusively young. But yeah, so they
Yeah.
work in the center. I do act as a bit of a mentor to them. I mean,
Yeah.
most of these young people, and not even just young, but most of them are engineers. I am not an engineer. Like, I am
Yeah.
way out of my pay grade. I don't even know what you're talking about. So I have to get them I have to get them to
Yeah.
really dumb it down for me, you know. And I
Perfect.
guess maybe being their mentor, um,
Yeah.
having to say, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. You have to dumb it down for me. I hope
Yeah.
makes me feel approachable, that I don't go in there like I know everything, because especially
Yeah.
on those some of those technologies around carbon reduction, and um, I don't it's not my world.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's okay. And I find the same with like humor because so many people say, well, I'm not a comic. And I'm like, it has nothing to do with telling the next best joke. It's you not taking yourself so seriously and bringing
Yeah,
that to every aspect, whether
yeah,
it's at work, whether in the boardroom, whether you're in your living room, whether you're dealing, I'm dealing with my 80-year-old mother right now. And I'm always using humor with her.
yeah.
I'm like, why am I going to buy you a present? I'm just going to get it back in less than, a few years. So, but I'm making light of something that, we know is going to come. So do you find when you're working with these young people, especially nowadays, do you find like you get nervous about like what is appropriate, what isn't, like what we could say 20 years ago or even 5 years ago? People are pretty sensitive now.
For sure they can be, and I get the sensitivity, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm on the way. Like, people have different sort of conversations about cancel culture and different things. I'm on the wave. Like, if something I'm going to say, or I use a phrase or a term or a name that's going to offend anyone, I'm not going to use it. That's the end of it.
Yeah.
I know different people have different perspectives on it. Where sometimes I do get a bit anxious or nervous talking to young people is using a reference that is too old. But then I got to
Yes.
be self-deprecating too, because I describe myself. In fact, my role at the Energy Transition Center, I'm a bit of this ambassador. I bring people on tours. I go around and
I
talk
love
to
that.
people. I make sure the coffee machine is working. But I describe myself as the Julie McCoy of the Energy Transition Center. And I had young people come up to me and say, we don't know what that is.
Do
Well,
you want
why
to
would
tell
they
our
know?
audience? Do you want to tell our audience
Well,
what
yeah,
that
way
is?
back, yeah, and most of the listeners, way back in the 1970s, we had televisions made of stone and wood, and there was a TV show on it. In fact, I think our TV was made of wood, but there was a TV show called The Love Boat, which they can Google and find out all about. It ran for about 6 years. But Julie McCoy was the cruise director, and she did nothing but walk around with the clipboard and make sure everyone was having a nice time. That's all. As far as
That's
I
all
could
she
tell,
did.
that's all she
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell people where the shuffleboard is taking place, or what time the bar opens. That's all she did. But
Do
so
you,
I kind of, if I make a
yeah.
reference that's way out of sync
Yeah.
with young people. But
Yeah.
again, I just have to laugh at myself. In fact, I like telling that story and being a bit self-deprecating because it's funny.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, if I mention Monty Python to a
Yeah.
20-year-old, they're like, who is that? I was like, oh my gosh, just the best comedy ever. So it's way different, They're like, it's not Rick and Morty. Forget it. I can't. Like, all right. And do you find are you different when you use humor? If you're at home with your family than if you're in the workplace? Do you find you're looser? Or?
Well, I know certain things I'll say will land with certain people. I have
Sure.
one of my very best friends. Her name's Leanna. She's a chef. I can make that woman laugh to the point where she needs like an adult diaper. But I know that what I'm going to say is going to make her laugh. My partner, Jason, he just looks at me and rolls his eyes like, would you stop talking? And Leanna's killing herself laughing. So I know sort of trigger things, what I can say. My
Yeah.
partner, Jason, he is very funny. He loves humor. But I love it if I can make him laugh because he wants to go first of all to eye rolling. like, oh, would you stop
Yeah.
talking? But if
Yeah.
I can make him laugh, that is, so I don't know, I'll
Yeah.
do crazy things like, well, yesterday he wanted some treats. We were watching TV and we had made dinner, and he's trying to be healthy, eat healthy. And I said, oh, I have some treats. So I brought in, the little mini eggs. I brought him three in this
Oh,
tiny little cup and set it down. I said, those are your treats. And he
wow.
said, he says, where's the bag? I said, no, no, no.
No.
So I hide the bag on him, which it's sort of this ongoing joke between us. But yeah,
Yeah.
I do use different kinds of humor. I use a totally different humor from my mom to make
Yeah.
her laugh. But
Aw.
yeah,
And
yeah.
do you find it like so when you're at work, do you find that the humor helps build relationships for you or has in the past?
Absolutely. I mean, now I work on my own. So I
Yeah.
guess, I do work with people. I have, if I'm going to be giving a presentation, as you do, I meet with the clients on ahead of time. We usually do at least one, sometimes two pre-calls. And I
Yeah.
try to let my personality and my humor sort of shine in that pre-call.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't really have any coworkers. I guess I do. I mean, yeah, I try to use humor and levity and self-deprecation as much as I can.
As much as you can. We'll just tell people you did a podcast in a closet. So,
I love doing that when I was doing my podcast during COVID in from this very closet, making the joke about I'm
yeah.
not in the closet anymore, but today I am in a closet,
In a closet. it's
physically in the
it's
closet.
oh my gosh. Well, you know what? I feel like the universe always has like a way of reminding us that you got to not take yourself so seriously. Like the other day, I did this amazing keynote. I'm feeling all like, yeah, I'm the bomb, and then I sit down at my book table, and my pants split in half. And my ass is just hanging out. I'm like, oh my God, could it be any more perfect? Wow. Yeah.
I love that. I do confess there are times when I have a hard time finding the humor in a situation.
Yeah.
Like if I'm really stressed out, I'm trying to get somewhere in a hurry, things aren't working out. Usually it has to do with stress and
Yeah.
time. Like I'm running late for something. Um, Later in the day, I always say, you could have just taken a moment to think about how absurd this is, that you're trying to load the groceries from Costco into your car and you're running late for something and the bag splits and the cantaloupe rolls on this. It's kind of funny, but in the moment it is not at all
It
funny,
is.
right?
Absolutely.
So I'm always trying to, it's going to happen again. I'm always trying to remind myself, can you try to see some of the humor in this? Or in 10 minutes, look back on this and look at the humor in this.
I love that. That is great advice. There's a great book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Oh,
He was a
yeah.
Nazi concentration camp survivor. He became a psychotherapist. He came up with a therapy called logotherapy, and he talks about putting a spin on what's stressing you.
Oh,
Right. So we all know how gross we are now, where we used to lick our fingers to open all the little plastic bags, but we can't do that anymore in the supermarket. Right. So we got to go. We got to wait for the veggies to spray the water and wet all our fingers and then open all the bags all at once. But he talks about putting a spin on what's stressing you. So laugh about it, dance about it, make a little poem about it where we're reacting to the stress differently than we normally would. And we're retraining because all those little moments of stress really add so much to like our bodies and the endorphins and the cortisol and all everything that's going on. So I think that's great. Look back even 10 minutes and go,
yeah.
okay, that was silly, I overreacted. Or yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's great advice. Oh
Like
my
when the
gosh.
bag splits and the cantaloupe is rolling away from me. It's funny, but at the moment, it is
Moment.
not. I was not enjoying that moment at all. But yeah,
No, no, you can't,
I
you
love that
can't.
advice to sort of rephrase or reposition what's happening and look at it in a different way. And that's from a Nazi survivor. He had bigger things going on than the cantaloupe is falling out of the bag.
It's all perspective. Come on,
Yeah,
cantaloupes are very important.
and they're funny.
I love that because I also had a friend and she was a horrible driver. To put a spin on what was stressing her, she started carrying around a clown nose. So every time someone would be like, "Ah," she'd be like, "Ta-da!" And then the person in the car would just start waving like they wouldn't know what to do. So I think that's great advice. Just look back on it, put a spin on it.
Well, it
Do what
would
you can.
certainly defuse the situation. You're not going to have road rage and start beating somebody's car with a snow brush if they're
When they're
wearing a
wearing
clown
a
nose,
clown
right?
nose. Exactly. Oh my gosh, I've had so much fun today. So I have to ask you one last question. What is the funniest thing that's ever happened to you?
This is a tough thing to answer because I don't know. I mean, well, there's the one story I love telling. I don't know if it's so funny, but so my partner and I got invited to a fundraising event here in Calgary, maybe about 10 years ago already. It was for Winter Olympians. Calgary is a big Winter Olympic city, lots of Olympians. One of our great friends, Katrina LeMaidon, was putting on this fundraising event. And the big draw was a man named Charles Barkley. Well, I've never heard of Charles Barkley. I hadn't heard of Charles Barkley. I thought, who's Charles Barkley? When it was explained to me who he is, and he was in Space Jam, I was like, oh, okay, I kind of sort of connect with that. But when someone said, there's Charles Barkley, I'm like, I don't know who Charles Barkley is. So anyway, I get a chance. My partner Jason and I, we want to go get our photo taken with him. But I'm thinking, this is crazy. I don't even know who this man is. So when we get up to him, I thought, he's either going to think this is hilarious or he's going to be offended. But I don't really care because I don't know who Charles Barkley is. But we get up there and I say, hello, Mr. Barkley. I said, would you mind taking a picture of my partner and I? We're all dressed up in these tuxedos and we look great. Could you take a picture? And he stops and he goes, you want me to take the picture? I said, yeah, we just look so good. He thought this was hilarious. And so I have a very nice picture. He's a great photo taker. A nice picture taken of my partner and I, taken by Charles Barkley, who is behind the camera. But never has anyone ever asked him to take a picture of them.
I love that.
So I mean, I don't know if it's a funny story, but I think it's, again, maybe a way you can use some humor. He loved it because, everyone's always fangirling over him. And he just liked sort of appreciated sort of that authentic moment where I don't really know who you are.
Yeah.
And he ended up kind of hanging out with us, and kind of a long story short, we ended up going out to this bar with him in Calgary later on. If you can imagine, we're in Calgary. We're going to a bar with Charles Barkley. And I'm still in a tuxedo, right? And people know who Charles Barkley is.
Yeah, of course.
So we're at this bar in Calgary, and, people start showing up and people start tweeting out that Charles Barkley's there. And I'm sitting next to him in a tuxedo. And someone asked me, are you his bodyguard? I'm like... Why would I be Charles Barkley's bodyguard? I've got these little muffin mitts. Like, I am not stopping anybody. Charles Barkley is perfectly good, taking care of himself. But just the absurdity of the idea of me being his bodyguard. But
oh my God.
He was great.
You could have told them you were last to be picked in gym class.
Well, and they asked me, are you from Los Angeles? I said, no, I live about 6 blocks from here. I just met this guy tonight. So it was this absurd, I don't know who Charles Barkley is, but it turns out he's a big deal. And now I'm apparently his bodyguard at this bar in Calgary.
Amazing. I love that. Which is so funny because I have to tell you one story because when I was a kid, I was sitting at a table. This was in the 70s with Cat Stevens. And he was like, and he was like the biggest singer at the time. And he asked me, I must have been like 7 or 8. He asked me who my favorite singer was. And I told him Donny Osmond. And everyone at the table died. And I was like, no, he's way better than you. I even got socks with his face on them. So I love it.
There was a cute little story. This was on the news in Edmonton, maybe a couple years ago. But do you know who Connor McDavid is? He's like He's one of the greatest hockey players of all time, plays for the Edmonton Oilers. In Edmonton, he is like Jesus Christ, like everyone would know. So some of the Edmonton Oilers in the preseason, they showed up at a elementary school and they're playing basketball with the kids and just running around the gym like it's and all the media is there because they love this. And they asked this little 6-year-old girl who is just adorable. They asked her, "What do you think about Connor McDavid being here today?" And she's all poised and she says, in the cuteness of only a 6-year-old girl could muster, she goes, "It's really exciting. I haven't seen any of his movies, but it's so exciting having him here."
That is so great. Oh my gosh. I love that. There you go. Todd, thank you so much for taking the time. And
This was fun. We could have gone another hour, I think.
I think so. Well, we'll have to have you back. That's what we'll have to do. Talk about some humor in the C-suite a bit more.
Yeah.
I just love your perspective, everything you bring to your speaking career now, and to all the people you're mentoring and the bank. They're all so lucky to have you in their lives. And I just think you're a really incredible man and leader, and so grateful to have you on the podcast.
Well, it's been just an absolute pleasure to be here and chat with you. We had some good laughs. Thank you for having me on, and thanks to all the listeners.
Thanks a lot.